Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 38, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Great Barrington Select Board will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and a requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to listen to the meeting may do so following the instructions at the top of the agenda. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we're unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the town's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Pursuant to Mass General Law 7C 38, Section 20F, after notifying the chair of the public body, any person may make a video or audio recording of an open session of a meeting of a public body or may transmit the meeting through any medium. At the beginning of the meeting, the chair shall inform other attendees of any such recordings. The town is recording this meeting, as is CTSB, Berkshire Edge, and other members of the public. Any member of the public wishing to speak at the meeting must receive permission of the chair. The listing of agenda items of those reasonably anticipated by the chair, which may be discussed at the meeting. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed. Other items not listed may be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. All 5 select board members are here. Let's start with the approval of the minutes. We have September 21st, 2020 and October 5th, 2020.
Motion to approve. Let me do the September one first because I've got a change that might be major.
Okay, go ahead.
So motion to approve the under new business F. Mark Brahinsky has recommended that this is about the dog walking, to refer to the Conservation Commission, Parks Commission, and Cemetery Commission to discuss their opinions on the bylaws for unleashed dogs. This is this next sentence. The recommendation we brought back to town meeting for further discussion. Is that correct?
No, I think it was coming back to us.
Okay.
I didn't see that.
So if everybody remembers that that's minor, we can just fix it.
Yeah.
And then under the public hearing, the attorney's name is highlighted and spelled wrong. I assume it's highlighted because they were going to check it, but it's Heuer. That was the attorney for the neighbors.
Yep.
That's all.
So the motion is to approve September 21st, 2020 with those changes. Do I have a second?
Oh, sir, second.
Okay, discussion. Roll call vote. Lee.
Aye.
Kate. Bill.
Aye.
Ed.
Aye.
And I. It's unanimous. Ed, the next one.
Motion to approve the minutes of October 5th, 2020.
A second.
Discussion. Roll call. Lee.
Aye.
Kate. Bill.
Aye.
Ed.
Aye.
And I. It's unanimous. Select board's announcements and statements. Lee.
Nothing for me.
Kate. Kate's having some technological difficulties. I'll go to Ed, I'll go to Bill, and then I'll go back to Kate. Bill.
Aye.
Ed?
Yeah, I have a request, I guess, and I'm sorry, it seems like at each meeting I give Mark more work to do. We have a special hearing tonight which involves removing trees, and I'm wondering if there's a way to put the tree committee in the process. So I reached out to Holly Hamer, who's the chair of the committee, and she's coming tonight. She'll speak for herself. But if there's I don't want to put an extra burden on people applying, and not just special permits, but probably any time and a project that requires our permitting has major trees. If there's a way just to run it, even if it's just giving the tree committee enough notice that they can look at the packet in time to come to us with this recommendation. That's all. Thanks.
Kate?
I don't have anything.
Oh,
That's what we're waiting for.
You were waiting for that. Sorry, guys.
that's okay. Town managers report.
Thanks, Steve. First up on my list is an update on the Housatonic Waterworks, a standing agenda item for us. Nothing new to report, except that we continue to work with our engineers, meeting with them, I would say at least weekly at this point, and we're still on track for a presentation from both firms this spring on the phase 2 study and the appraisal of that system. Housatonic Improvement Committee, I did invite both Dan Bailey and Eric Gabriel, Chair and Vice Chair of the Housatonic Improvement Committee, tonight to present just an update to the board on their progress and their overall progress, and then their progress specifically with the Housatonic School. So it looks like they're both promoted, and I'll get back to my updates after this.
Are you ready for me?
We are, Dan.
Thank you for having me, Mark and board, appreciate it. And Eric, feel free to jump in if I miss something here. It's hard to tell when I can't see anybody, it's hard to tell when somebody has something to say. But anyway, so generally, we've been moving along, perhaps at a slower pace than we would like, or maybe even some other people would like. I don't know, not to push any blame on it. We've had some technical difficulties, and we were also 2 board members short too. So sometimes a quorum has been an issue a couple times for us too. So those are just some general notes. But we've had some general discussions about Housatonic as far as what's been happening. Obviously the water quality has come up several times as an issue. One of our members has been monitoring a Facebook page and kind of collecting the comments and concerns as far as the water system goes. Obviously we've been tracking your progress as well too in that, and are very interested in hearing your recommendations as far as that too. We've also had some just general discussions about Housatonic history, maybe potentially reaching out to the Historical Society and Historical Commission to maybe get some walking tours when we can get back to those kind of things, some historic walking tours to Housatonic, just to highlight some of the immense history. We've also just recently we discussed the sidewalks in Housatonic. And I meant to reach out to Sean Van Dusen prior to this meeting, and I apologize I didn't. Just to see what the schedule was for the existing sidewalks, and as well as the potential of the expansion of the sidewalks. Going from continuing on North Street, I'm sorry, continuing on Main Street to North Plain Road. There we go. And the library has also come up on several occasions in the renovations to the library. The board took a vote to support the renovations and moving forward with a handicap accessibility. We did look at the recommendation that came out for that as well. So I guess that brings us to the Housatonic School, which has kind of been our main focus, probably because it's the biggest elephant in the room. We are in the works with creating a design charrette with this group of Berkshire architects, essentially for their AIA licensure. They have to do so many hours of community service every year. So we've reached out to Eric, you're gonna have to fill me in on her name, from Berkshire Design.
Yeah, let me pull it up here.
Sorry, it's not right in front of me. She's coordinating with us and several other architects in the area.
Harry Bartini.
There you go. Thank you, Eric.
No problem.
To coordinate a group of architects that would essentially take all the information that's been out there for the Housatonic School, which includes some of the Great House Partner stuff, the Housatonic Task Force stuff, the several RFPs that have gone out, some zoning stuff from Chris Rumble, and as far as some other facts and figures from Sean Van Duzen as well. So they've got a whole list of information that they're going to take and essentially give our committee ideas of what there is in the potential for the school. And it's basically everything's on the table. Based on the information they can come up with. We have not set a date. Obviously, in the wintertime, it's kind of hard. They can do it virtually. They don't need to be in the building. They have the schematics, they have the blueprints, they have all the information in front of them, but just kind of coordinating in that and getting it into a public forum. We're still probably a month and a half away from probably getting that out there. But the hope is that we could get some very concrete ideas as far as real potential for the school. Then our committee would be then take those and kind of see which ones kind of fit other surveys and things that have gone out, as well as probably including one of our own new surveys, and hopefully be able to present something to you guys within a reasonable time after the charrette is done. That's where we're at right now.
Anyone have any questions, Dan or Eric?
One, first of all, thank you both. I've been to most of your meetings, and I know it's especially with the school, it's quite a slog. So thank you. The design charrette, will there be an eye on cost? Like, will they have any idea what some of their ideas will end up costing, or is that a later phase?
Yeah, they can give generalized costs based on their designs and based on what they know. Obviously, it would be a very general cost.
Okay.
Yeah, but they should be able to give us some ideas, yes.
Eileen, you had a question? Just unmute yourself.
I was just curious as to what is being considered from the previous plan that the selectmen had ended.
As far as the Great House Partner?
Right.
So they have all of that. They have that proposal. The architects have that proposal, or will have that proposal in front of them. So they can take whatever information they really kind of want or need out of that. I'm sure, I can't speak for them, but I'm sure obviously they'll look at the things like the windows and the roofs, knowing that there has been some money approved through town meeting for that as well too. But it's basically everything's open for discussion. From renovation to tear down, I should include that too. So it's not just the fact of renovation.
Dan, if I can say a few things too, and I think the point of the charrette also is just to get a whole new set of eyes on the situation. You know, I think Carrie's bringing in, you know, people not necessarily from Great Barrington, and just like a fresh set of ideas and the whole sort. So I do think they're, like Dan was saying, they are going to look at the old plans, but just as a, like, this has already been attempted, or, you know, taking some of the information that's been existing and using that to try to move the building forward.
Trevor Forbes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for taking my question. Dan and others, I'm just concerned that the eyesore that is the school in Housatonic appears to be deteriorating dramatically, inevitably, in the weather that we're having at the moment during the winter. There are broken windows. The roof seems to be in very bad repair. I understand that necessarily the plans that you're dealing with the charrette do take time, and this is probably not going to really progress very much until we get to the spring. Is there nothing that can be done to at least protect what is left of this building prior to a decision being taken as to what we're going to actually do with it? It looks like an eyesore at the moment.
No, and I understand your point. We're really talking about the Housatonic Improvement Committee, and that's more of a question for Sean. And he, I don't think, is here tonight. So let's have that under town manager's report for the next meeting. Let's see, Michelle had her hand up and it's gone. Oh, there it is again. Michelle, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. As a matter of fact, it did come up during a Housatonic Improvement Committee, and I think both you and Ed were there with regard to the deterioration of the building, which I think is directly related to this conversation we're having right now by the Housatonic Improvement Committee. And I believe during that meeting, I think it was 2 meetings ago, comments, including those from the chair of the HIC, had stated, you know, what can be done to prevent further deterioration. And I think there was a comment that the windows were going to be boarded up. And I go by the Housatonic School every day, and I see that it hasn't been done yet. So I'm just curious, because those comments did come up during the Housatonic Improvement Committee, that all this conversation's very nice, but every day that ticks by, the building's falling apart. As a matter of fact, I personally went on a tour with the town manager. I think it may have been 2 years ago. And because of the leaking roof, the plaster on the second floor was caving in. So that was 2 years ago. So I'm curious how the Housatonic Improvement Committee is doing this charrette, but in the meantime, the building's caving in because of neglect. So I'm curious what the chair of the HIC thinks about that and their efforts, if I may.
Of course.
Well, Michelle, yes, obviously, you know my position on the building as far as the building, but also as somebody who's had his hands in construction for well over 20 years, knowing that water is not a building's friend. And I'm trying to shake the cobwebs off of the exact discussion. I know we did have that discussion, but and I don't have the minutes in front of me. I apologize for that. But I could tell you that it is a concern of the committee that the building has deteriorated more in the last several years. But I think we could certainly make recommendations to the select board to say, you know, let's just get some tarps on the roof. And I think that has been done in the past, if I'm not mistaken, from anybody on the board. I think within the last couple of years, if anybody remembers that. And there was a reason from the DPW superintendent why that was not done. I don't remember if it was at the end of a budget cycle, so it wasn't in the budget at the time. But you know, as far as the HIC is concerned, we are aware of the situation. But you know, it's other than asking why we can't get some temporary fixes on there. We can formally do that right now. I can simply say, you know, I think I take enough leeway in talking for the committee and saying, you know, what can be done to get some at least preventive measures going, is to keep it from deteriorating more.
It'll be on the next agenda.
Okay.
under
Thank you.
town manager's report. Anyone else? Lee, Kate, I'm sorry, and Lee. Go ahead, Lee.
No, I was following up with what we were just discussing. I mean, for me, that seems to be the number one priority, is to stabilize the building and make sure it's protected. So I would hope that would be the number one priority of this committee. So, but I look forward to hearing more in the next meeting.
Thank you. Kate?
I guess I just was wondering, because it seems like, obviously COVID has caused a lot of disruption in getting anything done, but I'm wondering, Dan and Eric, if there are things that we could be doing as a town or board to support the work that you're doing, if there's anything you need from us at the moment.
The short answer to that would be, we do need at least 2 more people on our board.
Okay.
Just for logistic reasons. I know recently Ed has been going to the meetings. Steve has showed up a couple of times as well. So I think just having you guys there, hearing some of the conversations certainly helps. We were put together as a board to give recommendations. Obviously we have concerns about the condition of the building, but I don't know if we weren't put in charge of the building, so to speak. We were a Housatonic Improvement Committee. So I think I am going to shift some of that blame back to the select board, being that it is a town-owned building. It's not oversaw by the Housatonic Improvement Committee.
You are correct, Dan.
And again, obviously we can recommend and do those things, give you suggestions, but it is in your court, and that paying more attention to those things. I know it's been Michelle, for example, and I don't mean to put Michelle on the spot, but for years has been talking about the condition of the windows and the safety of the building itself. So, I mean, it's at some point, it has to come back to the select board to make a decision to actually put some money or do something just to, secure the building.
Thank you, Dan. Anyone else have any questions?
Just a quick, I was at the first meeting of the committee, and without any notes in front of him, it was sort of a sad and impressive thing to watch Dan go through 15 years of that's been tried. So I am very impressed by the work of the committee. So keep at it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Dan, Eric, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
And we'll keep you posted as soon as we find get a finalized date for that charrette. Obviously, you'll be notified. It will be a public meeting, obviously, and those are the other logistic things that we're kind of working through in the next couple meetings as well too. So
Great. Michelle, did you have something else you wanted to say?
This is a technical thing. For some reason, Ed's audio is somewhat soft. Everyone else is coming through loud and clear, but when you speak, Ed, I have to really turn up the volume. Sorry to interrupt because of that.
That's okay. That's fine.
I'm
Anyone else have that
have
problem?
things to say, so.
I'll
No,
sit
no.
closer and enunciate.
Yes, speak louder, shout, and enunciate. That's correct. Mr. Forbes, did you have something else you wanted to say?
I just wanted to ask that if something actually happens to the building as it's deteriorating, obviously quite rapidly at this particular stage, something falls off it and somebody gets hurt, who is responsible?
It's a town-owned building.
So the town holds the responsibility for that.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mark, move ahead, please.
Okay, if I could just mention that I will ask Sean Van Duzen, our Public Works Superintendent, to come to our next meeting to provide an update. But we are aware of the issues at the school. His staff does clean up the glass from time to time there whenever we're aware of it. We are checking on it to make sure that it is secured. The police department is also checking on it because we've had some issues there in the past. In my understanding, on the roof. And the reason we have not attempted to do anything with the roof right now is because the roof is not in a condition where we can put construction workers up there to install tarps. And we also don't have any funding to do that. So it's a little more complicated than the town just overlooking regular maintenance. So anyway, onward with my updates. The current board and committee vacancies. Just wanted to again mention that we have a number of vacancies on boards and committees, and anyone out there that would like to step up and volunteer to fill these seats, we would love to have you. You can just send an email to my office or give my office a call. We have 2 vacancies on the Affordable Housing Trust, 2 on the Agricultural Commission. One is a regular seat and one is an associate member seat. We have 1 vacancy on the Community Impact Funding Committee, 14 vacancies on the Cultural Council, 2 vacancies again, repeating what Dan said earlier on the Housatonic Improvement Committee. And just remember that you would need to reside in Housatonic in order to qualify for that committee. 1 associate member on the Planning Board, 3 members of our Strategic Sustainability and Livability Committee, 1 alternate member or associate member, of our ZBA. And then we will be looking for members to sit on our trust policy committee as well. And I just also wanted to remind folks while we're on the topic of boards and committees that nomination papers for elected positions are available now, and they're available through March 19th at the town clerk's office. And the last day to submit those papers is Tuesday, March 23rd. So next on my list for updates, the fairgrounds property. This was a topic we discussed at a recent meeting, and at the board's request, Chris and I met with a representative from the fairgrounds board. We're also in the process of hiring an appraiser before we discuss what an offer from the town might look like and what alternate funding sources may be available to us. At this point, I would suggest holding off until we have the appraisal in hand, holding off on any further discussions, and then schedule an executive session under Purpose 6 to discuss next steps. So,
Mark Garfield has his hand up. Garfield, briefly. Just unmute yourself.
That was a mistake. I have a
Okay.
lower hand here, it says.
No problem. I lowered your hand.
okay, next on my list is Memorial Field, also a topic of discussion recently, and I was asked to provide an update. So the improvements to Memorial Field that we are looking to complete would be the installation of a new backstop, new dugouts, new bleachers, and ADA access. So despite a delayed start due to an agreement we had with the developer next door to complete those improvements by December 1st of this year, we as staff are proceeding with engineering, and we expect that we'll be able to complete this work over the next 2 seasons using both existing parks funding and possibly, hopefully, some CPA funds. And next up on my list, Main Street bus shelters. I'm pleased to report that we'll be installing 2 new bus shelters on Main Street, thanks to the work of Chris Rembold, our assistant town manager, Sean Van Duzen, our DPW superintendent, and our intern and regional transit chair, Tate Coleman. The first location in the northbound direction on Main Street will be in front of the former Hong Kong Buffet near BCC. And the second location in the southbound direction will be just south of the town hall exit driveway. Both are highly visible locations. Both will have minimal impact on parking or traffic. And the cost for each of these shelters is roughly $2,500 plus the site work, which includes laying a concrete pad. So I just wanted to say thank you to the Regional Transit Advisory Board for their work on this. This is another step forward for us in completing our or creating a complete streets program. So thank you. And finally, signs. I just wanted to circle back on a couple of discussions we've had recently on Lover's Lane and the Taconic Avenue and North Plain Road underpasses. So new signs for Lover's Lane they've been ordered and they'll be installed as soon as they arrive, probably within a few weeks. And as far as the approach for both underpasses, the North Plain Road and Taconic Avenue underpass, we're looking into right now purchasing and installing dynamic solar LED signs, which would be installed from each direction on both roads, and they would flash and warn drivers that there's a low clearance underpass ahead. So it may not be exactly like this, but something along these lines. And they would be installed. We're looking at maybe a late spring install on those. They're a little more expensive and a little more planning will have to take place before we get there. But we're making progress, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the board? Moving ahead under licenses and permits, Sandra Matthews, the Coffee Bar GB LLC, DBA Two Flower for an annual common victual license at 34 Railroad Street. Do you have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do you have a second?
Second.
So I have a second from Lee, a motion by Ed. Is there anyone here from, is Sandra Matthews here? I don't see anyone, which is fine. I was going to give them a chance just to publicize their business. Any questions before we take a vote? So I have a motion and a second. Lee?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
And aye, it's unanimous. Next, we're going to put 5B and 6A together because it's they're the same area that we're talking about. So it's a recommendation to the ZBA on special permit application number 91821 from 17 Mahawi Group LLC, Brian Hazelton, for expansion of a non-conforming structure at 17 Mahawi Street, and a special permit application from 17 Mahawi Group LLC, Brian Hazelton, Great Barrington, for a mixed-use development at 17 Mahawi Street, consisting of a single family home and a contractor's yard per zoning bylaw section 3.1.4 F1, and an increase in impervious surface in the water quality protection overlay district per zoning bylaw 9.2. I need to have a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
And second.
So I have a motion by Ed, a second by Bill to open the public hearing. It's a roll call vote. Lee?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Ed? And aye, it's unanimous. So Mr. Egan, why don't you start us off?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you suggested, we've got several items pending before the board this evening. So if you will, I will go through a general overview of the project, and then I will speak to the ZBA special permit application, and then speak to the special permit applications pending before the select board. With me this evening are Brett White from White Engineering and Brian Hazelton, the owner of the property at 17 Mahawi Street. The property is owned by an LLC, 17 Mahawi Group LLC. However, there are two structures at the property. One is a single family home, which is occupied by Mr. Hazelton and his family. And the other structure at the property is a barn. As the application states, and as you've stated, we're seeking a mixed-use development, and the MXD zone, the mixed use would be that of a single-family residence pursuant to section 3.1.4A1 of the Town of Great Barrington zoning bylaw.
and a contractor's yard pursuant to section 3.1.4 F1 of the bylaw. The other application is for a special permit with respect to the Water Quality Protection Overlay District increase of impervious area pursuant to section 9.2. And then, as I stated, the special permit application pending before the Zoning Board of Appeals is for the expansion of a pre-existing non-conforming use pursuant to sections 5.3 and 10.4 of the Great Barrington zoning bylaw. As I stated, Mr. Hazelton and his family reside at the single-family residence located at 17 Mahawi Street. And there's a pre-existing non-conforming barn that dates to the 1920s as reflected on Sanborn insurance maps. The pre-existing nonconformity with respect to that structure is the fact that it's in the rear setback, which is located to the south of the property. So let me just speak to what Mr. Hazelton's plans are. He operates a construction company called Wood to Stone, which he seeks a special permit for a contractor's yard. Now, contractor's yard admittedly is a broad term, and it can engender, thoughts of all kinds of activities. We've proposed special conditions, which I will speak to shortly. But in short, really what we're seeking to do is increase the non-conforming barn by the construction of a covered porch and a bathroom for employees and some other construction on the western elevation of that barn. Brent White will speak to the specifics of that construction. And then there's a proposal to build a shed in the western area of the property, and that shed will be used to store equipment and materials used in Mr. Hazelton's business. I should note that neighbors, as well as the Planning Board and the Board of Health, have raised certain concerns with respect to the proposal. And I submitted a letter to the Select Board as a supplement to our application, speaking to those issues. One was with respect to a potential wood furnace in use at the property. As I stated in my letter, there's no wood furnace. There is a wood stove in use pursuant to a permit, wood stove permit that was included with my letter. And there was also some concern about current construction being done at the property, and that construction being done on the property is unrelated to these permit applications. That work is being done pursuant to permit number R-20-0173, issued September 14th, 2020. It's important to note with respect to the special permit applications, namely with respect to the contractor's yard, the only materials that will be stored outside at the property are materials that would be used in the construction or improvements at the property. There will be no building materials stored outdoors on site. Any materials built on site will be stored indoors. In addition, heavy vehicles that had previously been located and stored at the property, namely a dump truck and a skid steer and accompanying trailers, have been moved out off-site and will no longer be stored on-site at any time. The only vehicles stored on-site in connection with Mr. Hazelton's business would be a Ford F-250 pickup truck and a Subaru that is used for estimating. There was a minivan that was previously parked on site, and that's been sold. So with respect to concerns regarding dust and noise and other things created potentially by heavy equipment. We feel that the applicant feels that those concerns have been eliminated as a result of our proposed special conditions, which I'll go into in a minute. One of those special conditions being that this special permit for a contractor's yard, if granted, would not run with the land. In other words, it would be specific to 17 Mahawi Group LLC and specific to the exact use that we're looking to make. With respect to the contractor's yard, again, it's a broad definition. It's the only one that fits what Mr. Hazelton is looking to do at the property, which is to have his home and business be on site. And again, we feel that the conditions that we've put forward serve to narrowly tailor what is allowed and by whom. Again, as I said, only construction materials associated with improvements to the property would be allowed off-site, much as any construction materials to a property, be they shingles or other things for construction of a home or other things we store on site. All construction materials for projects that are off-site will be stored outside. Trailers and other construction equipments would be being kept on the property overnight, will be stored indoors. These are our proposed conditions, and only domestic-sized vehicles shall be stored at the property. All other vehicles used in connection with the applicant's business shall be stored off-site. As I said, currently there's a Ford F-250 pickup truck, the domestic-sized vehicle, as well as a Subaru that's used for estimating. And then, as I said, our proposed condition, final proposed condition, is that this use would not run with the land. Not only would it be narrowly tailored, but it would be specific to this owner and any future owner that wanted to extend that use, or the special permit would have to come back before this board. Speaking to, I know there's a lot of information here. I'm trying to get through it in a thoughtful way with as few words as possible, and obviously open it up. But with respect to the ZBA special permit, what we're looking to do, as I suggested, is to increase, expand additional construction at the barn, which again is a pre-existing non-conforming structure, not a non-conforming use, and that structure is non-conforming, as I said, because it is in the rear setback. It's important to note with respect to the required findings by the ZBA, those being that the proposed project would not be substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. It's a two-part finding. One is the proposed project, does it increase the nonconformity? The answer to that is no. All of the proposed work complies with the Town of Great Barrington zoning bylaw. So by definition, it's consistent with that zoning bylaw. The other important aspect is it's an adaptive reuse of the barn, and it improves the aesthetics. At this point, Mr. Chairman, I would ask you whether we want to stop with the consideration of the ZBA special permit, or if you would like me to go into the required findings with respect to the select board special permit applications, namely the contractor's yard and the increase impervious area in the water quality protection overlay district.
Does the board want to take up the ZBA recommendation first, or do you want to hear the remainder?
I'm okay with continuing, but
Oh, it doesn't matter a lot to me, but it probably makes sense to do the ZBA one second.
So let's, Bill?
We are the special permit granting authority for the water quality protection overlay district. Is that correct? And the ZBA will be determining the special permit?
sort of.
No, yeah, that's, we are, see if I can get this straighter.
I think we're approving the use as a contractor's yard. ZBA is,
In the water quality protection.
and water quality. ZBA is approving any work on a building that's too close to the property line.
Right. Another way to think of that is, if this helps, is you could approve the use as a contractor's yard. ZBA could potentially not allow for the special permit with respect to the barn, and it could still be used as a contractor's yard pursuant to the conditions that the board seeks to place on it, and that water quality protection overlay district. So while this board will provide recommendations to the ZBA, it is the special permit granting authority only with respect to the contractor's yard and water quality protection overlay district. I don't say that to infer that I'm here to tell you what your job is, but just to just kind of make clear in everyone's head, not on the board, but in the audience, kind of what we're doing here this evening. So
Dennis, why don't you go ahead with, continue with your presentation?
great, I appreciate it. Just after listening to my own voice for long enough, it's good to have a break. With respect to the findings, the social, economic, community needs which are served by the proposal. Proposal allows the applicant to keep a successful construction business in Great Barrington, thereby providing jobs, increasing the value of the property, which obviously is up for debate, and some neighbors feel maybe otherwise, but it's the position of the applicant that it increases the value through reuse of that barn. Elevations are included in the packet, and the end product would be consistent with a residential nature of mixed use. Also allow the Hazelton family to both live on the property and conduct their business. And I would point out that I think that's a major consideration here. This isn't an applicant who looks to use the property as a contractor's yard and will be expansive use and will be, their house will be off-site. The Hazeltons have children and they're looking to make their home here, and they're not looking to make this an industrial site with heavy equipment. Traffic flow and safety. It's our position that the proposed project will actually reduce the overall vehicle trips based on the fact that the previous use was up to 4 professional offices. As an occupant of a professional office, namely an attorney, I know that there have been many vehicle trips for one law office throughout the course of the day. The vehicle trips here will mainly consist of Mr. Hazelton leaving in the morning, coming at night, hours of operation, 8:30 to 5:30, and some clients coming to the office just as a client would go to a professional office. So really no difference to, not making, not seeking a difference based on the nature of the business. And then I would just note that the amount of proposed parking exceeds the minimum requirements set forth in the bylaw. With respect to adequacy of utilities, the property is currently served by municipal water and sewer and will continue to be served with minimal increase in the contribution of flow as a result of the employee restroom. With respect to neighborhood character and social structures, the project as proposed allows for the ability for single family residents as well as the business to function on the same parcel, centered on a street which contains both residential and commercial uses as allowed in the MXD zoning district, and the proposal will facilitate a variety of business and housing opportunities, both purposes of the MXD zoning district. And I would also add that this is an adaptive reuse as set forth in the Town of Great Barrington master plan. The impacts on the natural environment, again, Brent White will speak more to this, but the project as proposes actually a number of improvements to the natural environment. First and foremost, applicant seeks to remove a number of invasive and hazardous trees that threaten the subject parcel as well as surrounding parcels. And the applicant seeks to replant healthy fruit-bearing trees along the frontage of the property to provide a natural screen. Finally, the proposal, really brings this property into compliance. You'll hear and have heard in the submissions of neighbors of some of the historic use of the property, and just in the spirit of acknowledging that there was confusion when this business was brought on site. The applicant, namely Mr. Hazelton, has been working with the zoning enforcement officer, Mr. May, and the photographs that are presented and have been submitted into the record are not representative of what's currently happening, and most importantly, I think not representative of what the site will be used for. Again, I think the application stands for the proposition that this property will be brought into conformity with the zoning bylaw, with the uses, and narrowly tailored. And then just finally, with respect to the potential fiscal impact, including the impact on town services, tax base, and employment, provide numerous fiscal benefits to the town, including increased value, increased tax collection through assessments, additional personal property taxes, and also allow for a new business, or I should say continued business in Great Barrington, and that live-work balance. With that, I would turn it over to Brent White just to speak to the Water Quality Protection Overlay District and some of the other components of these special permit applications.
Well, thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Brent White from White Engineering in Pittsfield on behalf of the applicant. I'd like to thank you for your time this evening. Attorney Egan has given you a very elaborate summary of the proposed application, so I'll try not to be repetitive. And really, I'd just like to emphasize some elements of the proposal that I believe are relevant to the Water Quality Protection Overlay District. I understand from the Board of Health hearing, as well as a healthy discussion we had with the Planning Board during our site plan review process, one of the questions came up with respect to the amount of impervious area on the property, the amount of parking area on the property, and what the net result is. There's no question that we are increasing the impervious area, and that is the reason we are seeking a special permit under the Water Quality Protection Overlay District. One of the benefits of this proposal is through the implementing the improvements as shown on our site plan, we actually decreased the amount of gravel parking area on the property by approximately 1,000 square feet. So again, with concerns of parking area, dust, noise that comes from vehicles parking, by default, we're reducing that approximately just under 20% by the removal of that additional parking area. One of the other benefits is with the proposed shed that will be constructed on the western portion of the property. First of all, we're going to construct that shed on helical piers to really minimize the amount of disruption and excavation on the property. But what we plan to do is capture all of the roof runoff from that shed and pipe that directly to a subsurface infiltration bed running along the western side of the property. Anyone who has a septic system will see generally it's plastic chambers with stone that absorbs water directly into the ground. As a part of our due diligence, we had done some test bits with Mr. Hazelton. One of the benefits of this site and really this entire neighborhood, having worked on a number of projects and reviewed other projects proposed, is this is essentially a sand and gravel deposit. So we have very permeable soils, which lend themselves very favorably towards infiltration and recharge, which is one of the goals of the Water Quality Protection Overlay District. The goal is to, as we improve properties, do so in a way that allows us to capture runoff and put it back into the ground so we don't starve that aquifer, which serves as a source of water for public water supplies. So in this case, with our application, the subsurface infiltration that we have proposed, that would allow for 2 inches of rainfall over the entire proposed impervious area to be stored within those chambers. And then in southern Berkshire County, many times you'll hear reference to the 100-year storm, which is approximately 7.8 inches of rainfall over a 24-hour period. Based on the storage capacity and the infiltration rate of the soils that underlie this property, we could handle a 24-hour storm in approximately 6.5 hours. So there's going to be a drastic reduction in the amount of stormwater runoff that comes from the property. In an effort to better address the existing barn, we've also proposed stone drywalls to be placed around the perimeter. So as gutters and roof leaders are put in, it allows us to capture and direct water more directly into the ground around the perimeter of the barn as we make other improvements to that. We've already discussed the amount of parking on site. We still show approximately twice the amount of parking that is required under the MXD zone for the mixed use. And one of the reasons we felt that was important was understanding some concerns that have been raised by the neighbors with respect to employees coming to the site, as well as possible deliveries. Mr. Hazelton and his family coming and going from the property. We felt important to be able to show that we are not relying on parking on Mahawi Street to not only accommodate our everyday traffic flow, but really handle that peak flow of, we're possibly obtaining a delivery. We have clients who are visiting Mr. Hazelton for a consultation for a project in their barn, as well as friends of the family coming and going. So with the amount of parking that we have on site, we're really trying to reduce any potential burden on the residents or other people utilizing Mahawi Street. With respect to trees, there's a total of 5 trees that are proposed to be removed, 4 of which are Norway maple, which is a known invasive tree, one that is of minimal value, and one that we're trying to remove. And the 5th is an evergreen tree immediately south of the main house that was actually struck by lightning. The lightning strike mark is still on the tree, and it's approximately 2 stories tall. So we feel it's a good thing to have that removed as a part of our overall improvements on the property, and to not only make up for the trees that are coming down, but also to soften the mixed use element of the property. We've proposed 8 fruit-bearing trees along our frontage with a minimum 1-inch caliper. Should be noted, none of the trees that are proposed to be cut are within the public right-of-way, none of which are a public shade tree, but the fruit-bearing trees, our hope is to not only provide a visual screen, but also just to make increase the neighborhood feel of the site, even though there will be commercial activity. At this point, I think those are the only items that I have to add that Attorney Egan has not described, but we're certainly happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
And the only thing, Mr. Chairman, if I may add, I just want to add that there will be no fabrication or manufacturing at the property. By the applicant's own admission, there have been mistakes made in the past out of ignorance. Again, he's worked closely with Mr. May as to what is allowed and what's not allowed. And so we just don't feel that what's happened in the past is in any way indicative of what's going to happen going forward. Again, Mr. Hazelton and his family make the property their home, and they wish to continue the residential nature of the property and the neighborhood. So with that, I'll turn it over to the board for questions.
Well, we'll first take people to speak in favor of opposition, then we'll take questions from the board. So anyone who wants to speak either in favor or opposition, you will have 3 minutes. Residents of Great Barrington, Housatonic, please, you'll state your name and address. So we'll start with David Souls. Just unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now? I'm David Souls.
Yes.
Hi, thank you very much. We purchased the property at 29 Mahawi Street, which sounds like it's far away, but it's actually just inches away from where the activity took off shortly after we closed on our house. 30 years, the Gracos owned the house, and we had no idea that the Gracos had endured a degree of turmoil at 17 Mahawi, and that they had filed formal complaints with the town for what they had endured in terms of cutting and grinding and noise and clanging and shouting and high volumes of vehicular traffic involving 15 employees coming and going, and putting heavy equipment and machinery up and down on trailers, hooking them onto and off of trucks throughout the day, getting deliveries from 18-wheelers, on the street, which used to have signs at both ends stating that no trucks were allowed, according to longer time residents. Those trucks have blocked traffic on the street, causing disputes with motorists who wonder why they won't move or why they're parked there. The street, as you know, is only 23 feet wide, and it's intended for pedestrian traffic with its sidewalks, which are sort of melded into the street bed, and people routinely have to park on the sidewalks in order to accommodate cars and still let cars go back and forth on the street. It's also used for ambulances to get to the Fairview Hospital. We came to Mahawi Street after 17 happy years in a mixed use area. We're perfectly comfortable with what it means to live in a light commercial district where there's comings and goings from lawyers and architects' offices. We are very comfortable with a dozen or 24 other businesses that quietly exist on the block. And when we bought our house, there was a sign in front of Brian's house saying that it had an accountant and a lawyer and an architect using it as office space, and that seemed fine to us. There was no identification of a construction company, and when the Greccos left the day we closed, their moving van pulled out, and almost immediately, I'm going to say within 36 hours, the character of the entire block changed dramatically before our very eyes. We got to experience up close and personal with front row seats what it's like to live next to an active construction yard. And that went on for 10 weeks until the neighbors who'd already been on the block invoked the cease and desist order and asked the town to step in, which they did. And Brian and Wood to Stone have been very compliant with that cease and desist order. But I can just tell you that during the period from our closing in July up until October 15th, it was astonishing. We couldn't even tell you the extent to which it reinforces what zoning is all about. The character of what was going on their property with all of the shouting and commotion and activity and the verticality of equipment, even when it's put on trailers and then even just parked there overnight, things the size of trees, basically, when you stack. Words can't even express just how dismayed and astonished we were at the way that the neighborhood had transformed. So, I mean, in closing, I would just like to say that I think the best proxy for how someone would act under a special permit is how they acted when they were under a cease and desist order. That cease and desist order, unbeknownst to us until it was re-invoked on October 15th, should have prevented the kind of activity that we saw and that causes us to come this evening and express our profound hope that the select board will take a stand against this. We feel that the Mahawi Triangle presents a very positive blend of light commercial and residential uses. It's very small. I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. It's arguably sort of chewed up by both Route 23/Maple Street and South
You would
Main.
just wrap up, your time is up.
Okay, thanks. That's it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Schultz. Mary Ann Norris? Just unmute yourself.
Okay, this is Mary Ann Norris speaking. We have been for 14 or 15 years customers of Brian Hazelton. And we recognize him as an outstanding citizen, honest, a very, very effective construction employer. We really appreciate all he's done, which he has done a lot for us. Okay, so that's a customer speaking. As a citizen of Great Barrington and one who recognizes some of the challenges we have as a community, I frankly feel very, very strongly that by encouraging employers such as Brian Hazelton, encouraging small businesses of this nature to be in our midst, not coming from Springfield or someplace, but being in our midst, means a tremendous amount for the quality of our town and for the quality of I hope, the neighborhood that he is in. I will admit I am not a neighbor right next door to this, but we have had a lot of Brian's equipment around our house for years. And I have to say, it has, I understand if you have gone into this with an expectation of having a residence that has nothing whatsoever going on around it, that it would be quite difficult to have a big dump truck come along your street and into a property. However, I find that there is so much value in us as a community embracing the small businesses that we have. And this is a small business. I have no idea how many people he employs, but Brian has been a student of good management. He's really worked at the process of finding ways of managing his construction company that's minimal impact on the community in terms of its environmental influence. And he's a wonderful guy to have as contractors.
Thank you very much. That's Robert and Marianne Norris, Prospect Street in Great Barrington. Next is Joe Boza.
Hi, Joe Boza. I live at 97 Castle Street, and I've been with Brian both as a partner and now as an employee since the beginning when the building was originally purchased and the business was originally formed. And I just wanted to reiterate what Mr. Norris said about Brian being a good employee. He treats his people very well, and he does care a lot about the impact that his business makes on the neighborhood. When the cease and desist order came, Brian and got the whole crew to get together and comply as best as he could to get vehicles off of the property and to get the yard cleaned up of all construction material. And I think that his proposal is addressing all of the issues that the neighbors have issue with. And as far as having a place to store the big equipment off-site, having a place to store any materials that will be stored inside and out of sight, and having a place to store small trailers and small equipment inside and out of sight. And I think that with the restrictions that he has put on himself with this proposal, I see no reason why the board shouldn't approve it. I think it will be a very low impact business going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan Bailey.
Thank you, board. Just a couple quick points, and I'm going to.
Dan, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. 207 North Street in Housatonic.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. Just a couple things, and I'm going to try to bring it back to why we're actually here. Hopefully, I certainly echo Mr. Norris and Mrs. Norris's comments about bringing small businesses back into Great Barrington and trying to encourage them to develop here. I think that's really important for our economy. I certainly feel for the neighborhood. Any kind of disruption is never a good thing for a neighborhood. But I think overall, having small businesses in a tight neighborhood, as long as they're controlled properly, can really enhance the town overall. But now bringing it back around to why this is in front of the board as far as the water protection, water quality protection overlay district. It sounds to me, listening to White Engineering's report as far as the water and the water runoff and the proposal to repurpose the barn. Seems to me that that is the key to approving this tonight. It's the efforts are being made to protect the water quality that's in question at this point. I know it's very difficult, having sat in your position, to sometimes look past some of the emotion that comes from some of these neighborhoods. But at the same time, I think you have to kind of look at what the issue at hand is. And I just encourage you to look at the science and the engineering and the studies that have been done by White Engineering and the proposals that Mr. Hazelton has, and consider that for approval of this project.
Thank you, Dan. Michelle LeBear.
Michelle LeBear, 70 Division Street. Thank you, Chair. First of all, I grew up here and I know Mahawi Street well. And I know there was a plethora of law offices on that street, as well as the chiropractor's office. And I just want to say, no way is a law office, comparing a law office to a contractor's yard. And my father being a builder and being a kid hanging with my dad at his contractor's yard, you're not comparing apples to apples. Also, I know firsthand, hiring a contractor to work on your house and living next door to the contractor's yard, totally two different things. And so at the end of the day, those contractors leave your yard and go somewhere else and you enjoy the quiet. So that's another point. Also, I believe that this permit may open a can of worms. On January 9th, 2020, the planning board was discussing bylaws, and one board member was very anxious to allow contractors' yards in residential areas. The minutes of the January 9th meeting don't reveal this, but I vehemently opposed it and actually stood up, and I was quite angry because in my opinion, we're destroying our residential areas. I also feel we're rewarding businesses who are not operating within the parameters of the law, but with a permit. I live in a neighborhood where one such business operated for a year without a permit, and later was just granted the permit, was allowed to continue to operate and granted a permit. I would like to know, would a citizen who's putting up an addition on their house or a new roof and didn't have a building permit to do so be given the same courtesy? Mr. Bailey mentions about small businesses as long as they're controlled properly. Great Barrington does not have the greatest history in enforcing its permits. And I think a couple times it's even come up by the select board members themselves. And as a matter of fact, it's kind of taken on a citizen enforcement. Citizens have to speak up, sometimes getting harassed in doing so, and then the town starts taking enforcement action. So that being said, we also need to look at the character of the neighborhood. A contractor's yard in this neighborhood is ridiculous. And living in a neighborhood that is the subject of poor planning, one business in our neighborhood, backup beepers beginning in the morning. Big trucks have backup beepers. The law requires it. So in this quiet little neighborhood, being exposed to that, it will destroy the character of the neighborhood. So there are many reasons not to allow this contractor's yard. One also being, once one is in a neighborhood, it's going to, again, open a can of worms in other residential areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara Motz.
I got it. Thank you. Barbara Motz, 22 Mahawi Street. After reading through the packet for tonight's hearing, I was kind of amazed to see the ambiguities, the misrepresentations, and the very questionable assertions made by the interested parties justifying the issuance of these permits. First of all, a major concern to me was how they muddled the terms contractor's yard and business, putting it together, often saying that the statement of intention is the ability for a single-family residence as well as a business to function on the same parcel. The business has two sides. The business on one side is the professional offices and client spaces, which is fine, fits right into the neighborhood, doesn't need special permitting, as far as I would understand. And I think that could serve its purposes. The other side of the business is a contractor's yard, which does not fit into the neighborhood and does need special permitting. Now, Mr. Hazelton has told us, and we've repeated it tonight, that he was moving the fabrication aspects of the business and the construction aspects off-site. That's great. So why does he need a special permit if he's going to do that? A special permit also, as was stated by, was by Mr. Egan, I believe, that contractor's yard, the term itself, is a broad term with a broad definition. If they're given a special permit to do this under, we understand there are certain conditions, then how do we know that in a few years, under this broad terminology, he won't tweak that definition and start putting in construction activities that really don't belong there? Why does he need, if he has an off-site piece of property that he's using for that, why is he pursuing it to this intense degree to get a special permit when there's so much controversy and so much concern? It does not belong in this neighborhood. Why would he bother to do it if he has that other site already at hand? We're not against his business. We're very happy to have his residence there along with the offices. But the other aspects of it are just too open, and they're just really of concern. And as far as the fiscal benefits, yes, that's been covered a little bit, our concerns. But if the fabrication work, this is also ambiguous. If the fabrication work is moved off-site, as Mr. Hazelton has stated in his letter of February 9th and other times, it would follow that the benefits of employment opportunities would not depend on the special permit being issued for the property. And there's also a number of problems. Just again, the language is ambiguous and misleading when they talk even about the trees. The project narrative states, quote, "In order to accommodate this proposed construction on site, there will be a total of 5 trees cut." That's in order to accommodate the construction. But on the other hand, the overview states this: the removal of the trees is because they threaten the parcel. Which is it? Is it hazard or is it inconvenience? I don't understand the ambiguity there.
Barbara, if you just wrap up, your time's up.
Okay, I just want to say I feel really compelled to take issue with the draft findings of fact and basis for the select board response. This to me appears to represent nothing other than a predetermined outcome of what I thought would be an unbiased process. Is this normal procedure? To me, it raises many concerning questions about the town's entire process of special permitting. It looks like it's a predetermined acceptance of this permit. And it's also.
Barbara, I'm not even sure how you can say that, so I think we'll wrap up right now.
Can I just say,
Your time is up. You're past 4 minutes.
My
so-
husband would like to say his own piece. Is that
Okay,
possible?
then you'll have to get back in line because I have someone ahead of him.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll allow him to speak.
Thank you.
That's Tom Doyle. Just unmute yourself, Tom.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm Tom Doyle. I am the owner through an LLC of 32 Mahawi Street and also 546 Main Street. I'd like to speak to a little of the history of this area. Its legacy goes way back. Actually, my mother-in-law lived at the property just directly across from the subject property until her death a few years ago. The legacy of this area in zoning has been largely a B2 zone. That's B for business. And the zoning efforts that were undertaken by the planning board several years ago, I thought were a very constructive step to encourage more housing development in along with accommodating business use. And I just think that without getting into the particulars here, I think adaptive reuse, repurposing of buildings in this area is very important. Everything may look nice on the outside, but there's a lot of buildings that are in disrepair. And we should be encouraging more of this type of redevelopment, reactivity. You might remember at 546 Main Street, there was a multifamily home there. I had to sit through more than a 5-hour meeting listening to how it was described as a lovely Italianate structure. Well, it was really a drug-infested dwelling. And when an inhabitant died, I finally made the decision to demolish the building. The neighbors in this area of the business district, now MXD district, should be grateful that I took that on and got rid of the problem. There could be other situations where if these buildings are not dealt with in a constructive way for reuse, you could have more of that. And I sent to the staff a map that's from the Library of Congress. Some of you may have seen it before. I don't know if any of the staff can put it up on the screen, but it shows the Mahawi Street area back in the day. And actually, right at this subject property was a large business. It was called the Brewer Lumberyard. So there is some historical significance, and it is in the 250th anniversary book of the town of Great Barrington. You can, read all about it. So just imagine what the area was back in the day when there were horse-drawn carriages delivering lumber up and down, and deposits in the permeable spaces by the hardworking horses. So I think the narrative of this being more residential in the history sense really needs to be debunked, because it has not been that case.
Thank you, Tom.
Steve, we can share that if you wish. If
Yes.
not, yeah.
I think Chris is sharing it.
I think so.
Steve, did you want that shared?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Mark, you'll have to give me that permission. Unless you have it. Mark, can you enable screen share?
Yeah, I'm working on it, Chris. I may be able to just share it. Hang on one second.
May I ask when this map is from?
Yeah, Library of Congress. I don't have the direct citation, but it was back in the late 1800s, I believe. It's cited in the 250th anniversary book. Might have to unless everybody wants to crooked their neck, you might want to.
Unfortunately,
Okay.
it's the only way I could share it.
Okay. So you're looking at Main Street and Mahawi Street intersection. You'll see what was formerly probably a lovely Italianate house that I mentioned had to be demolished due to the illicit activities going on there. Number 19, the U-shaped building is also referenced in the map and in the 250th anniversary book. That is the Brewer Lumberyard. So that was a pretty massive structure back then in the day. And across the street, all the way to the left, is currently 32 Mahawi Street, which is what I mentioned that we own. And the little building across the street, I believe, is the house that my mother-in-law lived in.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you for your time and good luck with your chore.
Thank you. Okay, next would be Barbara Motz, which I think is her husband.
Steve, can I say a word or two?
Yeah, name and address, please.
I didn't hear you.
Name and address.
Hi, my name is Eli Metz. I live across the street, 22 Mahawi.
Thank you. Go right ahead.
Mr. Brian Hazelton, from the first day he came into our neighborhood, started destroying the neighborhood, poisoning the air by using a furnace. By the way, he doesn't use any wood, cut wood. He uses wood from the leftovers of his own work, which means that wood is extremely poisonous. Okay, nobody pays attention to that. The guy is poisoning the area since the first day he came into. Then he started with the trucks. And more important, if he wants a license, which means he wants to store things here, and everybody knows when you store things, you have to bring them in and you have to take them out, which means more pollution and more poison into our neighborhood here. Okay, that's all I have to say. This man is really not a decent man.
Thank
He's
you very much.
full of
Let's not talk about
nonsense.
personalities. So next is we have ending in 434. Just state your name and address. It's a phone. Unmute yourself to hit *6. If you can hear me, just hit *6 to unmute yourself. While they're trying to do that, does anyone else want to speak?
Mr. Chairman, at the conclusion of the public comments, our team was hoping to respond to some comments raised before you would entertain closing your hearing, please.
We will not be closing the hearing until the board asks questions, so that's fine.
Thank you.
I'm just seeing if I want to give this person every chance to unmute themselves. So until we close the public hearing, I will let that one person speak. If they can unmute themselves, the number ending in 434. Okay, Lee, you wanted to add something on?
Yeah, actually, I'm just realizing I am an employee of one of the abutters, which is Construct on 41 Mahawi Street. So I believe that it's in the best interest of everyone involved for me to recuse myself from this before the board starts to deliberate. So
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so now I will turn it over to the board for questions. And Dennis, does your client want to make a comment before the board's questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. He received some some letters of support this afternoon that he was not able to get to the board. So I think he just wants to make a comment on his own behalf and then read into the record one of those correspondence.
Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for hearing me out. I really appreciate you guys going through the process with this. We are going for the contractor's yard because that really is the only avenue available for my type of business. The stipulations I put onto myself and my business is to really make sure that I'm not bothering my neighbors. I feel we're a pretty conscientious group, and that we do not do a lot of the things that have been said that we do. But just today, we did receive a letter from our abutter at 15 Mahawi. I'll read that quickly. It says, "Dear Brian, thanks so much for taking to go into such detail about your plans next door and sharing the illustrations regarding building and site plans. I appreciate the time you took and have the opportunity to ask specific questions. Please feel free to use this letter as a statement of support. We feel quite comfortable with all you shared with us, and wish you much success with your business and welcome your family to the neighborhood. Given the years we lived at 17 Mahawi as a home office in the early 1990s and as a home after we built our office at 15 Mahawi, we are excited to see your family enjoying living in the house. We have wonderful memories living there and our kids growing up in the house, and wish you and your family blessings and hope you enjoy the house as much as we did. Sincerely, Larry Bronstein." I also received another letter of support from a town resident of Great Barrington from 22 Lake Ave, Jane Globinger, and she says, "Dear Select Board members, I'm writing this in support of Wood to Stone as represented by Brian Hazelton and the permit request for 17 Mahawi. I'm working closely with Brian on a project for my home at 22 Lake Ave, Great Barrington. I find him to be transparent and professional and very aware of the rules and regulations guiding construction in my town, paying special attention to environmentally friendly options. My neighbors and I have also found the Wood to Stone team to be uniformly respectful and helpful above and beyond my expectations. Their permit request sounds very reasonable, and I hope you will give this well-respected local business person's request close consideration." I do believe that Brent and Dennis and myself have done everything we can to really work together with the neighbors' requests and fit in. Like I promised, there's no more fabrication and manufacturing happening on site, although it was not happening in great amounts as being talked about. And we as a company are involved in multiple environmentally friendly building groups that we just don't act the way in which it's being suggested that we act. I'll now leave it up to Brent and Dennis or questions from you guys.
Okay, so
Thank you for your time.
yeah, thank you. Board members, questions? You're muted, Ed.
Sorry. I'm going to start with a couple of the letters we got. You asked us how we could even consider something like this, which we get asked from time to time. And I just want to point out 2/3 of the voters, put this special permit process in place for this zone. We're required to consider it. The water quality overlay district isn't the only issue we're dealing with. There's one of the two permits. The big concern I would have as a neighbor, which one of them brought up, is the deliveries, right? The stuff you're storing has to get there. Semi trucks, I assume, do the delivering. How okay would it be to have limits on that? In the draft findings, there's suggestions of limiting the hours, which are all blank. I guess I might be asking the applicant for a suggestion of what hours. And again, I'm less concerned with the pickup trucks and the employees, assuming they're respectful and are quiet in the morning. But what do we do about the deliveries?
Well, sir, we receive very few deliveries for other projects. Multiple of my, or the vast majority of my employees don't come to the office ever. The barn structure for the past almost year now has solely been used as an office. And we've only done 3 manufacturing projects consisting of 3 man weeks total that weren't associated with the property itself. So the amount of deliveries that we do occasionally get, say, a box truck from a lumber yard to receive a window or a door, but it's not good business practice to be receiving those very often. Because my guys aren't in until 8:30, none of those things would show up till 8:30. Now I have received 1 tractor trailer in the past 2 years onto Mahawi Street. It was this past July, and I spoke to the police department, which is on record, before it happened because they could not fit into my driveway. So that's 1 time of a traffic offense or disruption. And we had people out there helping cars around. So even further limiting any kind of fabrication or promising to the town and the neighbors that I will not be doing any of it really minimizes any of that, any of those types of deliveries. But like I said, if my guys aren't there to receive anything until 8:30, I would not have anything delivered before 8:30. Now, UPS and FedEx, garbage removal, oil deliveries to neighbors, all those things happen at times uncontrolled by all of us. And I don't feel that me living here and having my office here and storage here just for some company tools would be any greater than any of my other neighbors.
I guess my question would be, if we, in the special permit, ban tractor trailers, would that be a problem for your business?
No, sir. I'm really willing to work with the town as well as my neighbors in any way that we can be reasonable through this. I'm limiting myself well beyond and almost taking away from the storage and the equipment that creates me into a contractor's yard, and really left with a contractor's office. So it will not affect me. And if I have to get a large tractor trailer delivery, I can use a friend or another business's larger commercial location.
Thank you. Ed, go ahead.
Well, just that let me ask, I guess, repeat a question that one of the neighbors asked, which is, why don't you store the rest of this stuff where you were storing your larger trucks?
Well, sir, I don't have another building. Like at where I'm storing my trucks, I did have a signed letter that I was complying to the cease and desist by a local business that was allowing me to store my larger equipment. And that's okay. When COVID hit, we kind of lost the ability to do that, and that's what made me go against it, or not comply to it, excuse me. But I don't have any covered storage at this location. Things are out in a field. So the only storage that I'm looking to do is leftover hand tools that do not fit into our traveling trailers that go from job to job. And I also don't want to limit myself that I can't pull in a traveling trailer for 1 or 2 nights to revamp and bring to a job again. So it has to do with just having covered storage for hand tools and other small pieces of equipment that don't always stay on the jobs in the job site trailer, or what we call the job site office.
And the trucks that you will be parking there don't have backup alarms?
No, sir. I have no backup alarms on my vehicles. I often hear backup alarms pretty early in the morning in Mahawi Street. I hear, we can hear Agway, we can hear SNA, we can hear people in Dunkin' Donuts. We hear garbage trucks, but I don't, besides the dump truck, I don't own one with a backup beep. And the couple subcontractors or clients that I occasionally work for or with, they've been definitely told that they cannot show up to the office until 8:30. And that is, I think I've had one truck in the last, multiple weeks that I can think of that had a backup alarm even parked in my driveway.
And then I think my last question, weekends? Will you be using it professionally on weekends?
I would not be using it professionally on weekends, but I think I should be allowed the same rights that any other neighbor or resident of Great Barrington would be on weekends, and be able to improve my home and work on my home during the weekends. But once the construction will be done for the building and the small amount of expansion that we're suggesting, that would stop. I'm a pretty busybody guy. I do work on weekends, and the things that I do are improvement for the house. Both the house and the barn, dating back even pre-1900, as you can imagine, definitely need a little tinkering. And as we all know, working full time and finding time to work on your own home is difficult, but I don't imagine it would be a great interruption any more than lawnmowers, leaf blowers, and other things that people use in the neighborhood themselves.
Thank you.
Just one point I would like to add to the discussion in terms of deliveries overall, with respect to projects that Mr. Hazelton is working on that are not the actual improvements to the barn or his home. It actually costs him money every time he would receive a delivery at this premises, and then he or an employee would have to take their time to then take it from the office to a job site itself. So I think there's a financial incentive for as much deliveries to go direct to a job site that would be factored into Mr. Hazelton's business as well. So I just thought that was important to note for the record.
Thank you. Phone number 434 has got their hand up again. I'm going to try to allow this to happen. So go ahead and unmute yourself. *6. Okay, we'll continue and see if they can get themselves unmuted. Bill, Kate, any questions?
I have some.
Go ahead.
I think before I ask them though, I just want to be clear so that I'm asking questions related to the special permits that we are doing. It's for the contractor yard and for the water quality overlay district. Am I correct in
That is
that?
the special permits we're doing. We're also
Right.
making a recommendation to the zoning boards of appeals for the expansion of the non-conforming structure.
Excellent. I just didn't want to ask questions that weren't related to what we were doing. So I guess I have some kind of timeline questions, which I know some of it was addressed but it doesn't feel totally clear to me about what was happening previous to Brian owning the property and now that he's owning the property, when he moved in, and it seems as though you've bought out your partners in owning the property, that you're now the sole owner of the property. When did this cease and desist happen? When it was broken? What's currently happening on the property? I guess it would give me an idea of, I feel like often we end up in these special permits and there's so much mistrust of people. And I think that I would like that timeline so that I can decipher for myself what feels trustworthy.
Dennis, do you want to? Or Brian, go ahead.
Me and two partners bought the property, and I believe it was November 2016. And we we're running a construction company out of the barn from day one. for the previous close to 12, 13 years or so, 2 other contractors had been running a construction company out of the barn as well. When we purchased it, I owned it until just I was in a partnership with it until just recently of June 2020. Well, when I purchased it from my 2 partners. The first cease and desist order came in July 2019. I've submitted letters to Ed May, and Ed May did come back and make sure that I was complying after that. And I was able to comply to keep all of my construction vehicles off site, which I felt was, and Ed felt was the sole part of the contractor's yard that I was doing. In March of 2020, when we lost 37% of a year's income due to COVID and could not keep our trailers on sites or other people's houses, and I did not have a location to park these vehicles, I brought them all back to site. And they stayed there from, on and off from depending on if we could get them to jobs or what jobs we were putting together, until October 14th or so of 2020. Since then, when I received a second complaint, I immediately, the following day, got them off site again, and they've stayed off site since. I had a partner who spoke that was a partner in the building as well as the business. We were both hit up with the first complaint, but on the second one, it was all me. I didn't really have very many options to do. During COVID, just keeping scrambling and a business going and the guys going, I got jammed and I didn't pay attention as much as I should have. And then once it was reminded, or I got another complaint, I apologized to the town or however you want to look at it, and I immediately started complying again. I'm really not here to bother neighbors. I felt like this property that was owned in the early 80s and most of the 80s by a construction company, then turned into a private home, and then this barn itself was rented out as a construction company. I thought it was a good fit for me, and I'm now trying to be it to be my office and just storage for some things, but that's I guess that's still a loose timeline, and I apologize. I don't know how much more I should get into it for you.
No, I appreciate that. So I guess I just looked through our zoning, and I don't see in there a definition of contractor yard. I guess I'm just curious, and that's probably more of a Chris or maybe a Dennis. I'm just curious of the exact definition of that, because it seems like you're just having your office and a space to meet clients and a space to store a few things. I don't know. I'm curious as to understand. My understanding, I guess, is not as clear as I want it to be. So are you planning on doing, do you have some sort of shop space in there that you'll be doing work?
No, ma'am. During discussions with the zoning professionals, I found out that the wood shop that was actually, run by previous carpenters as well is actually light industry, and that's not a contractor's yard. That's light industry. So I've stopped doing that. So it's really just storage of hand tools that don't go in the daily stuff, some scaffolding and ladders that come and go with our domestic pickup trucks, and really our office space. We have a private office on the second floor of the barn, and we're hoping to have a conference room, bathroom, and somewhat of a meeting place for the company. We do safety workshops, or at least we were doing safety workshops before COVID hit. as well as some social interactions, maybe once a week or less. And that's what we're trying to do. We're very much involved in the business and the brother and sisterhood of it, and working together as a family. And I'm trying to provide the place that we can do that well and receive our clients. And at some point, the property we feel could be a showpiece of our work as well.
As far as the definition of contractor's yard, I'm happy to share that unless Chris Remble wants to do that.
This is Chris. Go ahead, Dennis. Just note, Kate, there's a definition in the zoning bylaw, which I'm sure.
I
Dennis
just
will
couldn't
read.
find it. Thank you.
Yeah, that's okay.
gentlemen.
This is buried in section 11 on page 142. The definition of a contractor's yard is premises used by a building contractor or a subcontractor for storage of equipment and supplies, fabrication of subassemblies, and parking of wheeled equipment.
So this is Chris. In staff's opinion, the equipment and supplies and the parking of wheeled equipment are contemplated here, as you've heard. And so that, to your staff's mind, qualified this more of a contractor's yard use than a office use.
And I would just like to elaborate that if one were to take a close review of the original application and narrative that was submitted, and then the applicant through the review by the Board of Health and the Planning Board has made some serious concessions with respect to the type of vehicles to be stored on site at the applicant's expense to positively address the concerns of noise, larger vehicles on Mahawi Street taking up the property to do so. So again, what started off as a true contractor's yard is essentially an office with dry storage at the end of the day. And we feel is really an attempt through this permitting process to be receptive to the feedback from the neighbors while still allowing Mr. Hazelton to live and work on the property and provide jobs for his employees.
Other questions from the board?
Could you address the wood stove or the concerns the neighbors had about using scrap wood and things like that in the wood stove?
Yes, sir, Mr. Cook. I do not burn any painted polyurethane or plywood or pressure treated in my stove. We create quite a bit of kiln dried pine that due to our framing projects, as well as some raw wood materials that you can think of, scraps of flooring and other pieces. We do not burn anything reclaimed, not knowing where it's been or what it's been used for. So it is framing material, raw wood, and pallets. We in the masonry department does receive a lot of hard oak pallets, and we burn that. So we actually had it cleaned today by a former chimney sweep and employee. And it was clean. We have no signs of creosote or anything else. We're burning well. We're burning honest, and just the nature of my business. And I come from a biology background. I do not believe in putting those types of poisons into the air, and really would never do so. It's a small wood stove that was a permit pulled for it, and building inspectors have been there to see it. So I don't, I'm sorry, but what's been said is just not true.
Okay. Mr. Hazelton, how many employees do you have roughly?
Presently, we're down to about 12 or 13 employees, including my wife and I. We have a full-time operations manager that comes to the office every day, and a part-time bookkeeper that comes to the office 3 days a week for 3 hours. And then we have between 9 and 11 employees, depending on the time of year and how the hiring's going.
Thank you. Other questions from board members? So, Chris, I just want a little guidance here. I'm inclined to close the public hearing and then first take up the recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals, then take up the two special permits.
Sure, that seems like a reasonable process.
I have a question. If we're looking like, can we discuss, restrictions, conditions, things like that with the applicant after the hearing's closed?
I would advise you discuss them now in case the discussions, reveal the need for more information for some reason. So I wouldn't close it until you're satisfied you've had the back and forth that you need.
Can I ask, Steve, can I ask about some of the conditions that are proposed in the finding?
Yes, please do.
So I assume you've read those and they're acceptable, they would be acceptable to you? I'm talking to Brian, I guess. The one in the findings?
Yes, sir. You mean my own pieces?
I think using yours and using the other boards, Chris came up with some proposed findings, some proposed conditions in our findings. Do you want to point those out, Dennis?
I'm sorry, was that answer for me, or that question for me, Mr. Abrams?
As long as Brian knows where they are and what I'm talking about, because I have some suggested changes. It's on, I don't know what this
Yeah,
is.
it's on page 84 of the packet. If you'd like, I could read those. Brian has been made aware of all of them, but let's just, at the risk of taking more time to hear me talk, I'm happy to read those. Number one, contractor's yard shall be limited to the current owner applicant as follows. The contractor's yard shall be permitted only for the activities of the business known as wood to stone or its successor names, and only as long as Brian Hazelton is both the sole proprietor of the business and a resident of the home on premises. Number two, the contractor's yard activities shall be confined to the barn, new shed, and parking area of the property. Number three, no heavy machinery shall be stored on site. Number four, no fabrication of stone or carpentry projects shall occur on site. Number five, the barn and proposed shed shall be used as an office and dry storage only. Number six, no major construction vehicles such as dump trucks, excavators, skid steers, and the trailers associated with these machines shall be stored on site. The only business-related vehicles that may be continually on site are not more than 4 domestic-sized vehicles, including, for example, pickup truck not larger than an F-250, a passenger vehicle used for estimating trips, and a service minivan. I would just add that the service minivan has been sold, but the point is well taken there. Number seven, no trailers enclosed or otherwise longer than 6 feet by 8 feet shall be stored on site. Number eight, employees other than the resident owner of the contractor's yard shall not arrive on site earlier than, and I would just fill in that our proposal would be 8:30 a.m. No contractor yard vehicles or equipment may be moved. I'll leave that up to you, or later than I believe the applicant was suggesting 5:30, but I would let Brian speak to that. And then number nine, the above conditions may be modified by the select board only through a new special permit. And number 10, these conditions do not apply to the materials, trucks, or deliveries associated with the proposed building and site.
So I have a few suggested changes. Is this the time, Steve?
If you want a response from the applicant, now's the time. If you don't, and we're closing the public hearing.
No, I guess I would like them to be able to comment.
Okay, that's fine.
Because I don't know anything about being a contractor. So I would fill in those hours as 8:30 to 5:30 and I think that's what you were saying.
Yes, sir.
8:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Could we add or on weekends? And again, this is about employees and.
Yes, sir. My employees, I hope to be paying them and everything that they do not work on weekends. I just, you can only imagine that I'm working so hard to work and with my neighbors and make sure that I'm not a bother, but at the same time, working for myself on the weekend. I definitely don't want to be pigeonholed to never be able to pick up my hammer at my own house, if you
Right,
can
so-
imagine.
Yeah, this elsewhere, and I think it would include this too, it accepts, it makes an exception for work you're doing. I was gonna make a change to that also, where it talks about work on the premises. Where is that? Oh, the end. The number 10, these conditions do not apply to the materials, trucks, or deliveries associated. I would stay with proposed or future permitted building site improvements. That then frees you up to work on your own house on the weekends. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes, it does make sense, sir. You can imagine that I'm just, hesitant about that small little hiccup, but yes, that makes sense to me 100%. And I agree to all of those terms then.
And then I think my only other suggestion is, I think number 2, we talk about the contracted yard's activities shall be confined to the barn. And I wonder if we shouldn't say what those are, which is the ones we're allowing, which is storage, client meetings, storage of wheeled equipment as limited elsewhere here. That pretty much covers what you want to do, right?
Yes, I want to store hand tools and small amounts of equipment and office work only.
So if I were to add to number 2, the contractor's yard activity shall be confined. Oh, the contractor's yard activities, including limited to storage, client meeting, and storage of wheeled equipment, as limited elsewhere, shall be confined to the barn. So then, in effect, I don't want this to be a loophole for elsewhere where we said you can't have heavy trucks. You can't. So it would say the contractor's yard activities. Limited to storage, client meetings, storage of wheeled equipment as limited elsewhere, shall be confined to the barn, new shed, and parking area of the property. Is that all right?
Yes, the wheeled equipment confined to the, yes. Yes,
Okay.
I understand it now. I apologize. I was having a hard time following, but I think I got it in the end.
Okay, that's the only questions I have.
Anyone else? No board members, so a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
I'll second.
Any discussion? So the public hearing, motion was made by Ed, seconded by Bill. It's a roll call vote. Kate?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
And aye. Ed, let's start with a recommendation to the ZBA.
I have a
Yes.
concern about that, Steve. Shouldn't we decide whether we're going to grant the special permit before we tell the ZBA what we think they should do?
I'd be glad to do that.
It seems to make more sense to me.
Okay, that's fine. I like it being logical. That's okay.
Yeah.
Once in a while. Yes.
Just to clarify for the board, the ZBA permit doesn't necessarily hinge on the use, but I don't disagree that it makes sense, Bill. But just so you know, the ZBA permit doesn't necessarily hinge on the use.
Right. But our recommendation might.
So Ed, go ahead with the permit for
Well, can we
contractor's yard and the water quality protection.
can we talk for a bit first?
We can. We can chat as much as you'd like.
I will do it quickly because, there are 36 abutters on the abutters list, and there were about half that many objecting to this. So I really walked in feeling for the neighbors. But I've also been at all of the other hearings where the Board of Health and the Planning Board, and I really am impressed with how the applicant has worked with them. And it seems like these conditions really would limit the nuisance factor to not much more than other commercial uses. All right, so if I'm the only one who wants to say that.
No, I was going to say, I did a site visit, meaning I drove by slowly just to see, and I know the neighborhood, and I had to be convinced that this was not detrimental to the neighborhood like you did. And I have been because of the restrictions that we put on the special permit if we do approve it.
I think if it doesn't make a lot of noise or smell bad, it's probably okay.
I mean, when you look at the definition of the mixed use zone and what the impact of changes would be there, I guess it's one of those things that, I mean, ultimately you look at this with the conditions and it seems to be following those guidelines. I mean, do we look at it knowing that this existed there without a permit, even previous to Brian? I mean, ultimately, in some ways, this doesn't change anything that's happening there because it's been happening there. It's just allowing it to have some more definitions and rules that would safeguard the neighborhood. Am I interpreting what's going on here correctly?
I see what you're saying. I am not looking at it that way. I'm looking at it as a new special permit, a clean slate in a neighborhood that has many businesses, and to be honest, I think Ed brought this up, but I'll take it as original on my own. Not the water quality, but as far as a contractor's yard, there are so many restrictions on it. It's probably borderline whether a special permit's really required. I'm sure it is, but it's not like we're going to allow fabrication on it, heavy equipment, etc. So it's on the very light side of it.
Right. I mean, I understand that it's a new special permit, but there has been carpentry of some sort or another going on in that building, even previous to 2016. I mean, it is a new use in that it's a new special permit. And I do think that with all of the things that Brian and his partner are willing to do to make it work for his business and the neighbors, it seems like this is setting up a better relationship and living situation than what could have been there in the past. But I don't know.
Well, let's have a motion and find out.
So first motion we close the hearing, right?
We close the hearing.
Motion to approve the findings of fact for special permit number 919-21A and B as written and referenced as Exhibit A.
A second.
So I think there were changes made in those.
This is to the finding of fact.
Okay.
Changes are the special permit conditions.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any discussion?
I don't know.
Well, it's a roll call vote, and Kate, you're not going to be happy because you go first.
Oh, I know. Thanks, Lee. I know you're still listening. So I guess I know that we've done 8 million special permits since I've been on the board. We're going to do the findings and facts, and we're going to prove or disprove them or change them. And then from there, we're going to approve the special permit for the water quality overlay district or for we're doing the contractor yard first.
This is to accept the findings of fact. Then we vote on granting the special permit for being a contractor's yard. And that's where the conditions are laid out. So that's what we have changes from. And then we vote on the water quality.
I see.
So this is just to say that what Chris wrote is what we heard and found.
I guess, I mean, personally, I feel like I need some minutes to think about it, but I can tell that you gentlemen want to keep moving forward.
The rest of us to vote and then your turn if you go first.
I mean, I feel like we've heard a lot tonight. I just want to look at the facts and findings a little bit again. But
so what I don't want to do is continue this to another night unless we have to. So if we want to take a 5-minute break, I'd be glad to do that. That's very unusual for us, but if that's what it's going to require, will 5 minutes help you, or
It
are
would.
you asking to continue this to another night?
No, I mean, if I didn't realize a 5-minute break was ever an option, but if that is an option,
well,
then yes, I should be able to do that. But I would really like to look at them one more time before we go ahead and actually vote on them. I
Okay.
want to feel
It is
confident in the
8:15.
decision we're making.
We will come back at 8:20.
Thank you.
Okay, it is now 8:20. Our 5-minute break has passed. Just want to remind everybody that with one member recusing themselves, a supermajority is required here. So all 4 votes for a special permit are required, all 4 positive votes for this to pass. So we have a motion and we have a second on the permit, on the findings of fact. So it's a roll call vote.
I do think some things in the findings and facts need to be addressed. I mean, there are the conditions that have been put in there, and we just agreed to different conditions. I'm wondering if those need to be adjusted at all. And there was a few things about environmental concerns of vehicles, construction vehicles being there, which we've made certain that they won't be there, that I'm wondering if it's necessary to have those items in the findings and facts.
Those are in the conditions. Chris, am I correct?
Well, if the board's findings of fact, you go through, and what you've heard from the applicant and from the butters and from the evidence before you, you are making the findings on each of the criteria here in your draft. So you may have concerns about vehicle traffic, and you're stating them here. And it's those concerns stated here in the findings that provide the basis for then imposing a condition to ensure that the permit conveys the benefits that have been represented and that you expect. Does that make sense? So
yeah, it does. That's
the
very
findings are the foundation for the later decision.
Yeah. Someone in the audience has their hand up. The public hearing is closed. So
Chris, included in the findings is proposed, this is what Kate's saying, are proposed conditions. If we're planning to amend the conditions later on before we approve the permit, should we amend them in the findings? Or is that?
I think you could amend them in the decision if you want. In that case, you would approve the findings as written, except for the proposed conditions. But I think, I think it'd be cleaner if you accepted them here as amended.
Okay. So,
and then carry them over to the decision.
Thank you to the clever and sharp legal mind, Kate. I'm going to withdraw the motion.
Bill?
I'll withdraw the second, yeah.
Go ahead, Ed.
Okay, so the motion is now to accept the findings of, move to approve the findings of fact for special permit 919-21A and B with the following referenced as Exhibit A with the following changes. Condition number 2, the contractor's yard activities, I'd like to add defined as, or including, somebody help me on which one, storage, client meetings, storage of wheeled equipment as limited elsewhere. So it says the contractor's yard activities defined as storage, client meetings, limited to storage, client meetings, storage of wheeled equipment is limited elsewhere. shall be confined to the barn, new shed, and parking area of the property. So that's number 2. Number 8, employees other than the resident owner of the contractor's yard shall not arrive on site earlier than, we're changing that to 8:30 a.m. No contractor's yard vehicles or equipment may be moved earlier than, again, 8:30 nor later than 5:30, or on weekends. The above conditions noted by the select board. I think that's it. So I added or on weekends and changed the time from 8 to 6 to 8:30 to 6:30.
5:30.
That's what I said.
Okay.
You had a change in item 10 then.
Oh, you know what? There is no item 10 in the findings. So let's also
Oh.
add, right?
Right. Item 10, as I believe was in your packet, no? These conditions do not apply to the materials, trucks, or deliveries associated with the proposed, insert, or future permitted building and site improvements.
Yeah. So what am I reading from? Draft motion. Oh, the draft motions, you didn't have it.
Oh.
In the findings, okay, yeah. These conditions do not apply to the materials, trucks, or deliveries associated with, yeah.
Right.
That's there. Was I changing that one? Oh,
You
wait.
added the
Under the one before, about where I added weekends, I also had added on weekends except there was something about limiting it to his own, number 10.
Yes.
That's what you're saying. Sorry, I'm doing this on the fly. The conditions do not apply to the materials, trucks, and deliveries associated with proposed building materials and site improvements. Proposed, to change it to proposed or permitted future permitted building and site improvements. These conditions do not apply. I'll do this slowly for whoever's taking notes, and I'm sorry. These conditions do not apply to the materials, trucks, or deliveries associated with the proposed or future permitted building and site improvements.
So I have a second by Bill.
Everybody got that?
Yes.
Okay, so I have a motion by Ed, second by Bill. Any discussion?
I
Roll.
thought they withdrew.
Who withdrew?
Didn't
That
Ed?
was a new one.
New one. Okay, great. No discussion. I'm sorry. I'm with you guys. I swear.
It was a very long new one, but
Yes, it's a wonderful one. The roll call vote, Kate,
Aye.
Bill,
aye.
Ed,
Aye.
and I. That's 4-0. Continue, Ed.
Motion to approve, move in view of the approved findings of fact to approve special permit number 919-21A for the mixed use of 17 Mahawi Street, consisting of a single family home and contractor's yard with the conditions as noted in the findings, as amended in the findings.
Was noted and amended.
Yes.
I will second that then.
Okay, so I have a motion, I have a second. Any discussion? Roll call, Kate,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Ed,
Aye.
and I. It's unanimous 4-0.
Just a note for whoever's assembling the minutes that in the finding, in the printed thing we got in the motion, it did not have number 10, so that they should be taken from the findings.
Okay,
Okay.
next.
I'll make the motion and we can talk if we need to. Move in view of the approved findings of fact to approve special permit 919-21B for an increase in impervious surface in the water quality protection overlay district with the following, there are no conditions.
I don't think they need
Period.
it. I'll second.
So I have a motion, a second. Discussion.
Seemed fine to me.
I tend to take the word of a licensed
Yeah.
engineer.
Roll call vote, Kate,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Ed,
Aye.
and I. It's unanimous 4-0. Ed, next motion.
I don't have another motion, do I?
Make one up for the recommendation to the zoning board of appeals, which.
Motion to send a positive recommendation to the ZBA.
I'll second.
Discussion.
Should we add something about looking at our conditions? It probably isn't necessary, right? This is just the,
No, because I don't think it's necessary because they are allowed to store in the barn or yard or shed. So if the shed doesn't get built, then they'll be storing in the barn or yard,
right. Okay.
which
They could-
isn't
Right.
Yeah.
necessarily ideal, I think, for them or anyone else, but
So I have a motion and a second. Motion by Ed, second by Bill. Roll call vote, Kate. And
Aye.
this is a simple majority, by the way. It's
Right.
a recommendation, so.
I just like I understand that we're just giving a recommendation, but I feel like we in some ways put the ZBA in this weird position of kind of having to say yes, because otherwise they're going to be storing stuff outside, which would be unsightly to the neighbors or damaging to the equipment. But
They
aye.
probably don't like us anyway.
What?
They probably don't like us anyway.
ZBA?
Yeah.
Oh, fair.
Your vote?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Bill?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
And aye, so that vote is unanimous, 4-0. So moving ahead, I think we've accomplished what we. All the
Thank you all for your consideration.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, so next we have under new business, let's see if Lee comes back to us. Under new business, we'll start with Mark Phillips, the Strategic Sustainability and Livability Committee, Composting and Food Waste Diversion.
I'm going to recuse myself. I'm a recently former and possibly future employee of Stanton Home.
Thank you, Ed. Mark, go right ahead.
Okay, thanks you, everybody. So I've worked with the Great Barrington Strategic Sustainability and Livability Committee for the last, over the last year. And a few of those committee members are listening in tonight to explore food waste diversion strategies for the town of Great Barrington. And we prepared a letter that I believe was included in the packet. I'm not sure if everybody received it in time. And what I was going to propose is I could review the letter and the top level recommendations, and then given the time of the meeting and the other agenda items, we as a committee would be happy to return at another meeting if there's any deliberation needed and review of the recommendations.
So what, and I'm in agreement with you, what I was planning to do is have you go over this just at the top level of this, and then have us come back at our next meeting and ask the staff to develop an executive summary for us to approve.
Great.
I think you and I are on the same page.
Okay, so I'll just quickly go through. Does everybody have a copy of the letter with them?
We did
Great.
get it
Okay.
today, and I think it was posted online today.
Okay, great. So, you know, in developing this letter, we talked with a number of different community stakeholders. We talked with Sean Stanton, we talked with Veronique Blanchard, and then who's the Mass DEP municipal waste coordinator, and their own research as committee members. And so the first one is we would recommend that if there is still time and capacity to do so, that the select board include food waste diversion and processing strategies as a part of the transfer station engineering study, just to understand what is possible at the transfer station if we were to invest into food waste diversion. Number two, we would like to support the town in participating in the Sustainable Materials Recovery Program and the Recycling Dividends Funds. There's some administrative work that needs to happen to participate in these programs, and we would, like to move that forward for the town, and would be happy to support the town in completing that work over the next year to get the town onboarded to those state programs. Number three, We became aware of a project being coordinated by the town of Sheffield called the South County Food Waste Diversion Program. Renee Wood, the town of Sheffield recycling coordinator, is looking to develop a collection route for food waste in South County, which is premised on participation from municipalities in South County. That information has been relayed to Sean Van Duzen and put before him. And so we think this is something that the town should consider participating in. Number 4, we would like to invite the town to find a way to support some local compost stakeholders who are already working on this and committed to working on this for the long term, namely Stanton Home and Berkshire Compost. Stanton Home, as you are all probably aware, is located right on Route 41. And in addition to their existing leaf drop program, are beginning to develop a formal compost enterprise that will exist under their umbrella as an organization. And we think this is a great way for the town to leapfrog the significant infrastructure investments required for developing a compost operation at its own transfer station. And would love to find a way to support a cooperative relationship between Stanton Home and the town. At the very least, we are proposing doing that by just doing advertising, if possible, at the transfer station to let folks know that there are compost opportunities available in the town. And so we as a committee would also be available to support that communications process and to think through any next steps there. So those are our recommendations, and we're happy to remain in discussion with the select board and join you guys again at another meeting.
So does anyone on the sustainability committee want to say anything? And do the select board have any questions or comments? So we will come back at our next meeting with an executive summary, and we will continue this discussion. This is excellent. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Agricultural appointments. Do I have a motion?
Are we getting back to the
Agricultural Commission appointment?
right? Motion to appoint Luke Prima and Christopher Royer to the, better do it one at a time. Motion to approve Luke Prima, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, for a term expiring 2021. Christopher Royer for the term expiring 2022.
Second.
Any discussion? As always, a roll call vote. Lee, welcome back.
Yes.
Kate?
Aye.
Bill?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
And yes, thank you very much for volunteering. We can always use people on all of these boards. It's nice to put a few people on boards. Next is the continuation of the town meeting discussion on police operations. Before Mark makes starts with the comments, we will have some discussion from citizens. As usual, it's going to be limited to Great Barrington residents, 3 minutes, and everyone gets to speak once. So Mark, do you want to just open this up at all?
Sure. Thanks, Steve. So I was asked to include this item for discussion on tonight's agenda. I believe the idea, and Ed, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the idea that you proposed at the last meeting was to hear from residents early in the budget process rather than discuss police operations or the police department budget on the floor of town meeting.
Yes. So what I was, the number of people came to the last town meeting saying, let's cut the police budget. It was a sizable minority. In general, when it comes to budgets, I don't like to talk about numbers. The numbers aren't what drives the budget. What drives it is the things you want to do. So I'd hope that a meeting like this, where people could talk about what things the police are doing that we're paying the police to do, that should be done differently. So it's less about numbers and more about what jobs done by the police should be done elsewhere, or what are the suggestions? What were they trying to do by cutting the police budget?
And at some point, at a future meeting, not too future, we'll have Chief Storty come in and talk about his visions for future, not just budgets, and I'm not worried about money, but future operations. So let's start with, if just to raise your hand, and I'll recognize you to speak. If you're on a phone, and this hasn't been always successful, *9, and then to unmute yourself, *6. So anyone who wants to speak, please do so now.
Oh, also, Steve, you haven't mentioned it yet, but throughout the meeting, there have been about 60 people, including us.
Yes, the high point was 65, 55 attendees and 10 panelists. Erica Milkey, go ahead, just state your name and address.
Hi, my name is Erica Milkey. I live at 13 East Street in Great Barrington. I actually, I thought that the focus, I'm sorry, it's been a long meeting listening to zoning board. I thought the focus of this portion was slightly different than the way Ed just framed it. So I will just say that I really think it's important to have a police oversight board or committee, which is what I thought we were continuing from the last select board meeting. And that separate oversight board or committee, whatever we end up calling it, I think it's really important that it has a diverse selection of representatives that truly reflects a wide cross-section of Great Barrington constituents, ideally including members of protected classes. And I would love to see consistent evidence-based training for police officers. And we talked about that also including other town employees as part of the trust policy continuation. But I really think it's important with like a new chief to have the cultural competency and other types of bias training, and to make that be consistent so that it happens as we get new police officers. And I've been really concerned in the past to hear that how someone might be treated is dependent upon which officer they happen to interact with. And I would love to know that police officers are going to operate in a more consistent and humane way. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff Lowenstein.
Hi, Jeff Lowenstein, 1066 Main Street in Housatonic. And I think I'd just like to start by saying that I appreciate Ed's framing around this, of saying that we really need to have a robust and detailed conversation about police budgets and sort of what we're hoping to accomplish. And I think, I really value that. I was, as I mentioned at the last meeting, I was involved in the campaign to pass the trust policy. And I think what was really valuable there and really worked to build trust and safety between the police and residents of Great Barrington was that we really had an intentional and timely process that really included everybody, sort of all the stakeholders in the policing system, from police officers to folks who are concerned about safety, especially undocumented immigrants, to nonprofits, town employees. And I'd just like to say that I really think it's important in having a more robust discussion about the budget that we pursue that same kind of process of really convening a group of folks with all of the stakeholders in our community represented. I think those kinds of robust conversations are how we build real trust, real transparency, and real safety. And in terms of, I'd love to see that happen for the conversation about police oversight, as well as for the conversation about the police budget. And budget-wise, I think part of what the push at town meeting was really saying that we've asked police to take on jobs that they weren't expected to do in the past, and that they sometimes have felt ill-equipped to do. And I've heard that named by police officers as well in Great Barrington and in other Berkshire municipalities. And so I'd really love to just see an open dialogue that included police officers about sort of how we can redirect funding and responsibilities to social service agencies, human service agencies that are better equipped in some cases or more trusted in dealing with situations like, for example, addiction, domestic violence, immigration. And I'd really love to see open dialogue and discussion that included trusted nonprofits in those areas like Multicultural Bridge, Elizabeth Freeman Center, Railroad Street Youth Project, about how to make that shift so that we have an inclusive discussion that includes the police, that includes affected residents, that includes nonprofits. And so we can figure out together how to move towards a town where the police feel supported, the residents feel supported, and we really have more trust and safety. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jeff. Lily.
Yeah, my name is Lily Swartz. I live at 115 East Street. For starters, I was also involved with the trust policy campaign, and I spoke last time as well. I want to maybe just second what Jeff said around kind of the process that the trust policy campaign tried to hold, led by Bridge, but bringing in police officers and community groups and residents and other nonprofits. I think that the outcome of that was stronger, but also the process of it built trust along the way. And that feels really important as kind of a model and method for whether it's a conversation around budget or an oversight committee, just kind of building that in. I also think central to this idea of safety, which the trust policy really tried to hold, and I see reflected in the town's values too, is that this is a conversation about race and class and gender and sexuality, disability, like homelessness, but really thinking about it in broad terms and making sure that folks who represent those intersecting lived experiences are really being held central and heard in this. So that's just an element of it that I want to tease out. I also attended the Citizens Academy that the police ran, I guess about 2 years ago now. And for me personally, that was just very eye-opening and felt really powerful, I think, for most folks who attended, as just a way of understanding the work of our police and either establishing or strengthening their relationships with different community members. So I would love to see funds allocated specifically to continuing that program, whether it's a follow-up or a 2.0. I just think it was really successful, and I think the police have also said that it's a program that they have run before and have supported. And then, I also am thinking about how we have lots of community groups or organizations that are doing kind of really critical community work that's adjacent to the work of policing, right? Whether it's public health or racial justice work. And so I'm wondering if there's also ways that we could be allocating funding to have police officers attending those kinds of meetings, those community meetings that are happening. So it's an emphasis on getting police into those spaces that are already existing, instead of just asking folks to come to them. They're a little bit more of a give and pull. And yeah, just thinking about the kinds of skills that we would, I guess Erica kind of touched on this, but the kind of skills that would be important, whether it's restorative practices or working closely with social workers, just really thinking broadly about what safety and inclusion could mean for our town. And if it's a conversation around police, then what skills and support they need so that our town is really feels those things fully from our police. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Lily. Daniel Nielsen. Did I lose Daniel? Daniel, go ahead.
Hi, this is Dan Nielsen. I'm actually a resident of Monterey, and just now it was asked that we had Great Barrington residents. However, I know the trust policy applies to all the surrounding.
This is about the Great Barrington budget and the police department and the trust. You're right. I would always allow South County residents to discuss. Matter of fact, there'll be members of there may be members of other South County communities on the trust, but this was more detailed for the budget. I'll let you go ahead for a minute, though. I'm just in a very generous mood.
I appreciate your generosity. I mostly just want to use the minute to echo some of the priorities that Lily and Erica had just raised. And I was a participant in the Citizens Academy the first time around, and it was a really valuable experience. I really appreciated our GB police effort in making sure that the nature of their work was understood by the community, and really being willing to going into the details, not only what they do, but how they do it, how they think about it, how they're trained to do it. I think that mutual understanding is a really good starting point. And I think a repetition or even an ongoing Citizens Academy kind of program would be extremely valuable. I think also seeing representatives, members of the department out there in community meetings, both as police officers and as members of our community as individuals, would be very valuable and would help support some understanding going in the other direction as well. And I think that could only be good for police community relationships. I also want to emphasize that there are models out there for this kind of work that are centered on protected classes, specific representation by protected classes on committees of this kind. And I think that would be a very strong and tested model for Great Barrington to follow in setting up a committee of this sort. So thank you again for your generosity and for your time. That's all I have.
No one else's hand is up, so I'm going to call on Chief Story. If he wants to say a few words tonight, he'd like to talk. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm trying to figure out how to turn my camera on, but I don't see it. So I'll just talk. Tonight, yeah, I appreciate everybody's input that they've given. I've taken quite a bit of notes here, just kind of making sure that everybody's needs are being heard. And I am going to, work hard to try to answer those questions that were posted out there. I would just invite anybody who has some questions or, would like to talk to me, just to reach out to me at the police department, and we can set up a time where we can either meet via Zoom or, we can mask up and meet here at the station. I think it's important to continue the conversation that we've had. Some of I could get into a really lengthy conversation of a lot of the programs that we're really doing, or we had been doing in the past and that we're building upon. I just like to say that it's important for us to really understand the police department, and we're working hard to move the department forward for the groups or people that maybe felt we weren't addressing their needs. But you have to help us, help you, in the sense of reach out to us, and we will try to work together to make sure everybody's being heard. If I'm trying to change and put some as much transparency as I can with the department. I've tried to create conversations with the board to find out what their vision is and what they see the department moving forward. And I think we've made some good strides in the short period of time. And I'd like to continue to build on those relationships that we've previously had in the past, and to kind of renew them and refresh the ones that we've started, and to expand upon it. Someone had mentioned a little while ago about the Community Police Academy, and I kind of posed Sergeant Carlotto with a task of, because it has been such a success, I don't believe any of the select board, if I'm wrong, have any of you attended the academy?
I have not.
No. So I said it would be kind of fun to do it. I know you have some limitations on meeting, but he's come up with a way that we can create a community police academy for the select board. So all you can kind of experience it. It would be broken up into segments. So if any of you are interested in participating in that, we're putting that out for you. And I know it's, like I said, it's complicated. with the meeting laws and stuff, but we can make it work. So that's an invitation. I think you may get a lot out of it. And like I said, please just reach out to the police department if anybody has any questions or concern. And I'm willing to talk to you. If you have some groups that you want us to be part of that we may be missing, please reach out to me. And we just started this community outreach program, and our officers are really excited to get out there and identify areas that we can do better at. But I need some help too to find out who we're missing here and what we can do better.
So Chief, I would love to participate in the police academy with one caveat. You have to figure out a way between the two of us to work it into my schedule, which at this time of year may be very difficult, but more than willing to do that.
Sure. I think,
Can 3-year-olds join us?
I'm sure for some parts.
Okay, there's someone who has their hand up, and it's a Galaxy phone, so I'll allow you to talk just briefly. Just name and address.
Hey, Steve, it's William Walsh. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, William Walsh, 15 Park Street, Great Barrington. The Chief's doing a great job, and I concur with what he's saying, and I was very pleased with the appointment. Just following that up, I'm pleased with the process that's being laid out tonight, with the roadmap, so to speak, only because last year we did this on the fly at town meeting, and it was very, very difficult, obviously, to do that. And I don't think there was ever any reconciliation between the group that made the proposal and the town, and that I'm aware of. So I'm pleased that that's being done tonight, well ahead of the May town meeting. Again, it's tough doing it that night on the fly when a good chunk of money and officers could have lost their jobs, and officers would have been working by themselves on many shifts, one person. It just wasn't, a good way of trying to debate it that night when we were kind of caught off guard. And, taking some of the money and dividing it up to nonprofits, some out of town even, I think that just takes some time to look at and be reviewed by everybody. So the whole thing would have affected, town officials, the selectmen on down last year, finance committee meetings, people looking for money and overtime that affects taxpayers. Would it change police operations if it had gone through? So it affected town officials and the community members, and not just the police. So we, I think the town was caught a little bit off guard last year. And, I think it's good having tonight's discussion and some sort of process that you're trying to lay out going forward, not trying to do it on the fly and town meeting night. So thank you.
Thank you. Chief Story, do you have anything else to add?
No, just the ending. Please, people, just reach out to me. Let's have the conversation. Let's start talking. I will make time for anybody who wants to come in or make an appointment to see me. That's how I'm going to learn how we can do better here and how we can serve our community better, is by people bringing up their concerns or any issues they may have with us. And we'll just keep moving forward.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Moving ahead, since it is getting to a late hour, to endorse a grant application to the Berkshire Regional Planning Commission for 2021 District Local Technical Assistance. Chris, do you want to say anything about this?
Oh, sure. Thanks. Thanks, everybody. Each year, BRPC puts out a solicitation to the towns, and we rely here in Great Barrington on the DLTA program quite heavily for our planning work. We have done so over the years, using DLTA to support our master plan work, our open space work, zoning studies, etc. This year, we're looking to advance some of the analysis that the planning board is proposing relative to Stockbridge Road, and writing some regulations that would encourage housing and the development of some community services. So that's not something that we're able to take on in-house in terms of staff and maybe access to some of the expertise. So we will we will seek the expertise of the Regional Planning Commission, and the commission likes to see the highest elected official sign these, so that the commission knows that the town is on board with this general request.
So do I have a motion to endorse this grant application? You're muted, Ed.
Brilliant, just a minute ago. Motion to endorse the proposal to Berkshire Regional Planning and to authorize Steve to sign it.
Second.
So I have a motion by Ed, a second by Bill. Any discussion? Roll call. Lee?
Aye.
Kate?
Aye.
Bill?
Aye.
Ed? And I. It's unanimous.
Thank you.
Citizens.
We'll leave a copy.
I'm sorry?
Oh, I was just going to say we'll get a copy out there for you, Steve.
Thank you very much, Chris. Citizen speak time? Dan? Maybe a record, Dan. This is your third time, all legal.
Yeah, yes. And I know it's getting late, and I'll take my 3 minutes and hopefully less than 3 minutes. And you're going to hear me say something that I probably won't say too often, so you guys want to hold on to your seats. I want to commend the select board for their actions tonight. I honestly came listening to this, I wasn't sure which way you guys were going to go on the special permit, and obviously I was in favor of it, but if you had not approved it, I think I probably would have been all right with that too, because I can understand the angst in a lot of your voice. But I want to commend you for the time you took to make sure you got it right, and hopefully worked with both the neighborhood and the applicant to come to a very reasonable and logical conclusion that hopefully works for everybody. So thank you for doing that. And I hope you can continue to apply those techniques to special permits that might come in the future. I mean, honestly, that was a very good example of thinking things through and adapting as you went. So thank you. So with that said, along the same lines of kind of the mixed use and things like contractors yards, and I know Michelle, I don't know if she's still on the line, but how she had brought up some concerns about that. You know, I think one thing that COVID has taught us here in Great Barrington especially is that we can't necessarily rely on being just restaurants and overpriced clothing shops and art galleries. Not saying that they're not necessary for our town. I'm just saying that we need to move beyond that. And things like mixed use are going to help us move beyond that. But of course, and maybe this isn't just for the select board, it's probably for some of it's the planning board too. But I think as a community, I hope we can start looking at if these type of situations aren't going to work in residential neighborhoods, even though, you know, the planning board goes through a very laborious process of, you know, coming up with these mixed use zones, then where are they going to be, or where can we? Is there a better place to put these kind of things? And I don't want to, not to use a four-letter word of industrial park, but is it time we start thinking of an industrial park somewhere? Just something to think about. I know that might be a question for the planning board, but again, just as kind of moving forward with a lot of these things that are going to be coming up, you know, is there an ultimate way to avoid, you know, disruption to communities and neighborhoods and things like that? So anyway, and lastly, my third thing is going back to the very beginning of the meeting that was 3 hours ago when Mark brought up all the vacancies on the committees. Obviously, it's very tough, and anybody that's been on any board understands the time commitment, regardless of what committee it is. So I commend anybody that's going to sit through a 3 hour meeting, especially. But is there a way where you guys could start looking at some of those committees that are very good and well-intentioned, but perhaps they could be either folded into or realigned with other committees, so we're not spreading ourselves so thin? Yeah, for example, looking at, and I'm not trying to pick on any particular committee, but like say, for example, the Sustainability and Affordability Committee. It's a longer title than that, but does that committee, for example, fit into any of the other committees that have similar visions, but could, instead of trying to find whatever 10 people for 2 different committees, you can find 6 people for 1 committee, kind of thing. And I don't know if it's worth, and then maybe in your next, in upcoming strategic planning meetings, to look at what committees are out there and what they're doing, and is there an endpoint to them? Are they still on the same track? Are they fulfilling their mission, and have their roles change? So just something to think about.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Barbara Motz.
Thank you. Barbara Motz, 22 Mahawi Street. Thank you for letting me speak again. There was, I guess, some confusion going by what I've seen in other public hearings. I thought that there would be more time given for us to speak and to follow up with questions. I'm sorry that that didn't happen. It's disappointing that all the testimonies submitted by the abutting neighbors included in the packet and spoken tonight seem to be brushed aside and disregarded. And this kind of came after Mr. Hazelton asserted that he hadn't done what was said. Well, maybe he feels that he hadn't, but the fact is, because of what we had problems over with what was going on there since 2016, there were 2 cease and desist orders that were brought against him. And as a reward, the draft response specifically states that the responsibility of minimizing the detrimental potential impacts should best be left to Mr. Hazelton. Now, if you heard or saw in our testimonies, then you should have concluded that you should have seen that since 2016, what was seen by him as a safe environment was seen by us as a very subjective opinion. And as the neighbors have attested to, it's an opinion that's not shared. So what I'm asking, I guess, is what is our recourse? Who do we go to now if we feel that, as we have many, many times in the past, that he was just he was just not following the regulations. He wasn't following what was best for our community, and he was
For his
just
neighbors.
and for the neighbors, and he was just disregarding the
rule of law.
laws that were in place. So what do we do now?
If he is violating the special permit, you would call the building inspector's office.
Okay, so we've done that in the past. So I have to spend the rest of my retired years on being a watchdog. And I don't think, I'm sorry, but I think that that's not why we live here, and that's not what our neighborhood is about. And I feel that you've put us into a very difficult position. So thank you.
Thank you. Michelle LeBear.
Hi there. I know you guys want to go home, but just really quickly, I'm grinding my teeth here over Mr. Bailey's comments because it wasn't that long ago he and a neighborhood, and I was involved, were battling against affordable housing in an area. And to say, you know, we got to put a contractor's yard somewhere, I think we have to get away from the attitude that, hey, my neighborhood's out of the woods, let it go to some other neighborhood. What we're seeing now is we're pitting neighborhoods against neighborhoods and people against people. And I know we like to have an air of community here in Great Barrington, but that's not what's being cultivated. Where you have citizens that have to, who are charged with enforcement, they call the building inspector or they call the select board member or whatever. But like I said, I was a little confused by Mr. Bailey's comments. Here's a neighborhood that's dealing with contractor's yard, but he was very vocal regarding an affordable housing project in a family member's neighborhood. And so we need to stop doing that. I mean, I'll come right out and say, I'm going to protect my neighborhood, but that doesn't mean I'm going to turn my back on other neighborhoods. And like I said, if something doesn't go in my neighborhood, I'm going to watch where else it's going to go and make sure that the select board or the planning board or the zoning board of appeals is doing due diligence. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Select board time. Lee.
I'd like to just thank everyone that spoke up during the discussion on policing. It was really, as usual, it's wonderful to have such engaged community members. And I thank the select board and I thank Ed for bringing this up. I was fortunate to have a meeting today with Chief Storty in his office for a little over an hour, and I came out feeling very comfortable and confident in the department. Not that I hadn't before, but I urge any community members that that feel that they have questions to take him up on his offer, or if they want to come see me, and I'd be happy to be the bridge, because I know it can be intimidating. But I just wanted to thank Chief Storty and the police officers and everyone that has spoken today. I think it's a very, very important discussion that we should continue. So just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Kate? Bill? Ed? And I have nothing. Media time. Seeing no hands raised. By unanimous consent, we are adjourned. Thank you. It's been a good meeting, even though it's a long one. Excellent meeting.